all of you in the States. Good evening to those of you in Israel. My name is Logan Levkoff, and I am very honored to speak with you all today. I was thinking about the story I wanted to share today, and my plan is this. I want to make you sad, mad, and then empowered. This story is definitely an emotional roller coaster, but to be honest, that is very much the experience of being a Jew. I've always been a proud Zionist, but there is no question that my life as a whole and my passion for Israel has changed dramatically in the last few years. I've given a lot of thought to why I feel Israel in every fiber of my being. It would be easy to say that she's a place that I feel tied to because of my grandfather, Milton Shapiro. He was my person, and maybe that's how it started. But that's not it. Sometime in the last few years, I have found myself feeling untethered, desperate to connect to a place that is bigger than me, desperate for some spiritual grounding, despite the fact that I am not religious. I needed to get my feet on the ground and my hands in the dirt. In December of 2022, I was in Boston at National Conference speaking on a panel entitled Champions of Zionism. It was the weekend of my grandfather's yahrzeit, and as I watched Russell's opening plenary, I cried. I cried at the magnificent development that JNF had been responsible for since my grandfather's presidency in the 90s. I cried knowing that Russell knew my grandfather and was one of the last JNF connections to him. And I cried because I realized that despite my work sending non-Jewish student leaders to Israel on caravan and combating anti-Zionism online and in schools, despite sending my own teenager to Alexander Muss High School in Israel, that same now college student is on this Zoom right now. Hi, Maverick. It had been 7 years since my last visit. And in that moment, I felt like I was losing my footing. I came home from Boston and said, I need to go now. I left for Israel 4 weeks later. In the last 16 months, I've been back to Israel 5 times, 6 if you count tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow I return to Israel for my 4th trip since October 7th. To say that I feel privileged and humbled by the opportunity to be back would be a great understatement. To say that my family is afraid that I'm going to just pick up and make Aliyah without telling them is not entirely an understatement. But the truth is, there's nowhere in the world I'd rather be, even during a war. Why? Well, for one, as some of you may know, it's exhausting being a diaspora Jew. From the moment I wake up in the morning, my transformation from under-caffeinated mom to Jewish warrior begins. It's true. I put on armor the moment I open my eyes. The armor is designed to protect me from a myriad of enemies. The professor who assigns a grossly anti-Semitic book to one of my kids, the other student who calls my kid an ethnic cleanser, the person on the subway who may hate me when they see my Magen David on my finger, which I am not taking off, or the many, and I mean many, people online who wish for my death in various, though not so creative ways. Sometimes the enemy is obvious, other times they're hiding, but often in plain sight. I can promise you one thing, I am always ready. I've been on high alert for as long as I can remember. In fact, I'm not even sure I know a time when I wasn't. Israel is the only place where I can breathe. And despite the war going on, to those of you who know what I do for a living, it's probably not a surprise. My field is currently chock full of Jew hate. My professional industry is sexuality education. Yeah, great place to be now, despite the fact that my field was actually pioneered by Jews. For almost 30 years, I have amplified issues that I felt deeply passionate about, even if they weren't issues that directly impacted me. All of those issues have come from my Jewish values, from my Zionist values. And now it's almost laughable that a field devoted to consent and queer rights and indigeneity and bodily autonomy and reproductive justice has, let's just say, come out as believing all of those things, unless you're Jewish or Israeli. I have watched my professional peers tie themselves into knots to justify their anti-Semitism. And if you're wondering, do I feel betrayed? The answer is yes. Yes, yes, yes. But it has given me an unbelievable opportunity to press the refresh button on all of it. I lead with Zionism everywhere I go. And it's become an unbelievable litmus test to determine who I want and who I'm willing to have in my life. I mean, let's just say my circle is getting a little bit smaller. But I was trained to deal with adversity. I have an expertise in difficult conversations. I was a young person talking about sex publicly, on TV, and in the early days of the internet. Sean Hannity, yes, that one, once suggested to his audience that I take underage girls to get abortions without parental consent. I don't, in case you're wondering, but trust me, I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of hate. It has taken a long time, and thanks to my dermatologist, you cannot tell, but I have some seriously thick skin. And yet, despite the sex talk and everything else, I will tell you that I have never dealt with hate the way I have since speaking up for Israel. I wasn't kidding when I said that on any given day, people call for my death. I am called a Nazi, genocide Barbie, I get that one a lot, Zio pig, grossly misogynistic terms I cannot say on this Zoom, and I have been told more than once that it is a shame that Hamas missed me. Remember when I said I have thick skin? I don't back down, and I won't stop. The stakes are too high. I've been screaming into the void for years, or at least it feels that way, begging people to wake up. This has never been just about Israel. This is about world Jewry. For those of us working in Zionist education, whether professionally or as a labor of love, or those of us who have teens or college students, we have seen the undercurrents of blatant Jew hatred masked as anti-Zionism bubbling under the surface for years. We see it in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. In the last 5 years, long before October 7th, my own family experienced school speakers who compared Jews to Nazis, speakers who demonized Israel, teachers who publicly supported BDS. Oh, but don't worry, I found them because they're stupid enough to have public accounts. Anti-Zionist Holocaust teachers who told my son that, I quote, Soviet anti-Zionism was a legitimate political movement, to which he replied, his great-great-grandparents did not flee because they yearned to see Jerusalem. I mean, he is my kid after all. And if we had all day, I could regale you with stories, highly entertaining, by the way, of how I threatened to make an anti-Semitic incident at my son's hyper-progressive New York City private school an international PR nightmare for them. I even called the civil rights attorney. I am not a Jew with trembling knees, which is good because a fight is what we currently have, and I am relentless. Can you imagine what it's like to live with me? You could probably ask Maverick in the chat. I'm sure he can regale you with all of it. Sorry, Mav. And while Maverick is a freshman on college campus, and his campus is considered pretty good compared to so many other universities, including my own alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, shameful, it isn't without its challenges, like Jewish anti-Zionist professors assigning anti-Semitic texts and failing certain students on assignments for not following the class party line. But I feel so very proud that our kids know the importance of speaking up. And if you think I'm fierce, my offspring is just as fearless, but a hell of a lot nicer than me. I was raised to use my voice for good, and I knew how lucky I was growing up. And there is nothing better than using my voice to fight for Jews and our homeland. I consider it my greatest honor to follow in the footsteps of Zionist leaders who came before me, particularly those that I am related to. I've done that online and in person, and sure, has it come at a cost? Yes, it has. But if I'm not fighting for us, who am I fighting for? On October 7th, I was certain that my soul had shattered into pieces, impossible to repair. I couldn't eat, I cried all the time, and to be honest, I feel guilty about that. I wasn't in Israel, I was here. My biggest challenges were getting my daughter's high school to let us have an emergency Jewish parent meeting, marching at rallies, donating money, desperately waiting for my Israeli friends to reply on WhatsApp, desperately waiting to see which of my American friends was going to ask me if I was okay. It all seemed luxurious by comparison. Screaming online, debunking lies, making myself a target, despite how much I enjoy it at times, wasn't sufficient. I felt that untethering all over again. I wanted my feet on the ground and my hands in the dirt. I had to be in Israel. I had to put my arms around the people I love and let them know I was there and wasn't going anywhere. At the end of October, I emailed Russell and Dina, when are we going? I want to be on the first trip. And I know I was not the only person to send that very same email. Since December, I have now taken part in 2 different JNF volunteer missions, and our daughter Memphis was on the JNF teen volunteer mission 3 weeks ago. All of them have been extraordinary. I have watched people thrilled to get dirty, to feel like they were doing something, anything to help. I have watched people who have never been to Israel before step up and say, this is my time. I have watched people who may typically be difficult and demanding travelers let it all go, be flexible, not sweat the small stuff because they now realize that the small stuff is meaningless. And the appreciation for volunteers is boundless, but I'm not entirely sure I deserve it. Because to be honest, selfishly, I go to Israel so that I can feel less alone too. But despite the barrage of absurd information and news or things that are masked as news, I don't feel alone in the same way that I did early in the war. I know who I am. We know who we are. We have gotten a horrible and simultaneously important wake-up call. We got too comfortable here. We actually started to think that Israel needed us more than we needed her. We could not have been more wrong. We are one family. And sure, families argue. Families don't always share the same political values, but we have each other. And in the end, we only have each other. So this is the time. We need to be sending our children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews to Israel. We need to be going as a family. Bar and bat mitzvah trips are not enough. We need to send our kids to Mus. We need to make sure that Jewish families understand their ancestral connections to Israel, to give them the tools to understand and fearlessly support Zionism. We need to be teaching modern Hebrew in community centers and religious schools to connect us to Israeli culture. I can tell you that trying to learn it now without vowels is neither easy nor pretty. I think that means I'm trying to speak Hebrew, but it is very difficult. In the end, here is my plea to all of you. Support Israel. Visit Israel. See the Israeli spirit, the resilience, the devotion to justice, and witness the heartbreak. Because we are one family. And whether we like it or not, October 7th and its aftermath are now part of our story as diaspora Jews too. And we get to control what happens next in this incredible story of ours. Thank you so much for giving me the platform to speak, and for all of the generations who came before, and all of those yet to be born. Am Yisrael Chai.